In about 12 minutes, you can have super crispy and delicious chicken thighs. Let's find out how. I love this book, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. It's by Samin Nosrat. She worked with Alice Waters at Chez Panisse, and she wrote a book about food science, and she wrote a book really that is targeted towards home cooks to explain what's happening with their food. Not only the science, but also great tips, great ideas, and I use this book quite a bit. The recipe that I'm using comes from the back of this book today. I've never made it before. It's called conveyor belt chicken, and the process is only described. She doesn't have an actual recipe in here, although the process is pretty simple. You take a heavy object, wrap it in aluminum foil, get a cast iron pan, very hot under medium heat, and then you lay a skin-on boned chicken thigh onto that cast iron, set your heavy object on it, let it cook for about 10 minutes, flip it over for about 2, and what happens is it renders the fat underneath that skin, imparts a ton of flavor into the chicken, gives it a nice crispy skin, and it's done very quickly. The reason why she calls it conveyor belt chicken is one of her friends had cooked it for her husband, and her husband said all he wanted to do was lay under a conveyor belt of this chicken as it flowed off the conveyor belt into his mouth. I've never tried this recipe before today. I do cook chicken thighs quite a bit, and I'm a huge fan of chicken thighs. I cook them in tacos, I cook them just by themselves, I cook them with a quick sauce, sometimes with a pan sauce, but I've never tried this recipe before. So today I'm gonna give this recipe a shot, so why don't you come join me?
This recipe calls for skin-on, boneless chicken thighs. Now this probably will not be available outside a butcher, but with a small knife and skin-on, bone-in thighs should be okay. We're gonna bone these. Take the thigh, flip it over onto its skin, cut alongside the bone on each side. Slide your fingers under there to pull the long part of the bone away from the flesh. Once you've done that, slide your knife under the bone and slice out, staying as close to the cartilage at the end of the bone as possible. Grab that free end, and using your knife, you can scrape the meat off the bone toward the other end. Now, carefully cut around the other end of the bone. There's a big chunk of cartilage there on the chicken's knee joint or hip joint, depending on which side you started on, so be careful around that. You're not going to get all of the meat off this bone, but don't worry, you're still going to use this bone because you can stack it in a plastic bag and save these. Bone a few meals worth of chicken thighs, and you'll have a nice stock. To save this, just press all the air out of it, seal it, and store it in a freezer. Now, I'm going to salt these and let these come to room temperature for about 25 minutes on a cookie sheet and a rack. Salting these and letting them set is going to make a huge difference in the final dish. In fact, in the near future, I'll be talking about how to dry brine on the channel. This is what I'm doing here. Now for this, I'm going to use a cast iron pan. The recipe will require that you set something heavy on the chicken as it cooks. You can also use a heavy can of tomatoes or something like that. I have this cast iron press. You could also just use another cast iron pan. Just wrap whatever you're going to use in tin foil and set it on top. You get the pan hot and add olive oil. I'm going to caution you not to overcrowd the pan. What happens when you do that is two things. The first is that the water will leak out of the food and cover all the area that is open, and it's going to start to boil, basically steaming your food. You'll also suck a lot of heat out of your pan when you put a lot of material in it. So overcrowding your pan also makes it cooler. So when I made this, I actually did overcrowd the pan, even though it didn't seem like I did, because when I pressed it, it spread the chicken out flat. What's happening in this recipe that doesn't happen when you don't use a heavy object to weigh the chicken down is that it's pressing all the chicken skin in contact with the hot surface of the pan, so every bit of it gets crispy. It also cooks it at a low-medium heat, rendering the fat under the skin, and that in turn helps flavor and keep the chicken juicy. So after 10 minutes, we're going to quickly flip this and then just wait 2 more minutes until the other side is cooked. We're going to take it off the heat and let it sit 5 to 7 minutes before cutting into it so the juices can redistribute through the meat. If I were going to season this with different spices, I probably would not season the skin because it's going to sit in that pan and cook for 10 minutes and it might scorch the spices. So I would actually season the other side of the chicken. It will cook all the way through, and as it cooks, it will draw those spices into it and it will flavor the chicken very nicely.
All right, so this is conveyor belt chicken. The crust, as you can hear, has some crunch to it. The chicken is cooked all the way through, both sides. I found that the cooking of the chicken was faster than it normally is. I normally cook, when I cook on my stovetop and I leave it just without any pressure on it, it normally takes a lot longer, and this time it didn't take as long. So that's a definite plus. I'm gonna cut into it and taste it. It's perfectly done, juicy still. And I wanna get a little piece of the skin too, because I think that's the only reason why you do this, is because you wanna have a piece of that skin and you want that crunch. I gotta say, I'm a fan. I think this is an excellent way to make chicken, and it's gonna change how I do this for the future. I've never tried this before, and I'm really impressed. I think you cook this on that low, medium, it's more like a sort of medium heat rather than medium low for the correct amount of time, and you do develop a really robust flavor. And it melts away all that fat, that subcutaneous fat, and it makes that chicken really juicy and really flavorful. So I salted it maybe a half an hour before I put it on, let it sit, it came up to near room temperature, and then I just threw it on the cast iron pan and set the other cast iron pan on top, and it really did an excellent job. This one in particular was done with the press I have, because I wanted to try the press, and so this one was what the press did, but the other pieces of chicken were also really well flavored, and they also had just such a great crispy skin on them. So I am actually a huge fan of this and will continue to do this in the future. So big hat tip to Samin Nosrat, who wrote Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. It's one of my favorite cookbooks, and you should pick it up too, because it really does have a ton of information for people who really love to be home cooks and want to learn about why foods do the things they do when they cook. All right, that's it for this week. Please like, share, subscribe. Go ahead, hit that thumbs up. Put this video in somebody else's feed so they get a chance to watch it. Thanks for watching. Catch you next week. Till then, season liberally.